Right on. So good to be here.
Yeah.
We had a great walk and talk the other day where we went into connection, how fundamental and foundational various aspects of our connection are to our lives. And we have that video up, so if anyone wants to tap into that,
Check it out.
they
It's on
can
the
check
Kingdom
out
Health
part
YouTube.
one. In a sense, this is part two.
Yeah.
And even in part one, before we started that, I was like, man, I really want to talk about rest. And then we ended up talking about connection. But connection, again, is foundational or fundamental to rest. Because if we don't understand our connection with the divine, our connection spirit, soul, and body, our connection one to another, our connection with creation, we can't really truly rest. And that's not to make it complex. It maybe sounded complex, but it really is simple. And so, like, I think in this talk, just getting more into dynamics of rest. But what do you have to say to that?
Well, I think first and foremost, like, rest is fun. You know what I mean? Like, when you actually step into it, like today, for instance, Arun and I were talking earlier and the conversation came up of, like, what should be done today, right? Like, what needs to get done? And then, we talked about why not just have fun today and why not just let it go from there. I don't know about you, like, we spent probably 2 or 3 hours just talking, on the balcony up there.
Yeah.
We've come down here, we had lunch, we're sitting by the waterfall creating content that's flowing from a place of, even with bloopers and like, and different pieces that maybe didn't go perfectly. It's like, this is still something, it kind of feels like kids playing. I really think that's like the energy and the speed of rest. It should feel like play, and even when you play, you scrape your knee, you get sand in your mouth, but you also go down slides, you feel the wind go through your hair, and we're the children of God, right? Not the adults of God, as Brian Orm likes to share. And so I think on the concept of rest, it's like, last video we talked about connection and coming into creation with Christ and just understanding as we study the Creator and his art pieces, we get to learn a little bit more about his nature and integrate those in our own walk and understand that. And man, it's like when you start to move from rest, I look around and rather than seeing all this as, something nice, but I have to get to an appointment in 20 minutes, I see all this and look around, I'm like, man, God must have had a great time designing that waterfall. Like, it must have just been fun.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And just the overall aspect of connecting into nature like this is just, it's not boring. It's exciting like that, and it creates this kind of Super Saiyan electricity where you want to do more.
Yeah.
Right? And it energizes you, man. So as I think about rest like that, it makes me think of fun. It makes me think of things almost turning into an anime like Dragon Ball Z. You know what I mean? Like, it just feels like your life's starting to go from a place of adventure rather than I have to do this or I need to do this. You know what I mean?
That's good. I like that. There's this scripture that I always speak on, and it says you cannot enter into the kingdom unless you be like a child. And I broke that down because of studies in neuroscience about brainwave states. And we flow through various brainwave states throughout each day, each evening, and everything like that. And so I would say you cannot enter into the kingdom unless you enter into theta. So theta state is like a meditative, imaginative brainwave state that a kid consistently and chronically operates in. Because they live in like a sense of awe and wonder. So they spend more time in rest, and therefore the realm of play, imagination, of constructing from that other world is just more at play for them. And we as adults, especially in this era where more and more people are talking about being at rest, we're learning to enter back into states that we forfeited as a kid as we got trained out of it. And so, like, you're exactly right. Like, just being here in nature and truly letting yourself appreciate it allows you to become like a child. Even as I was down at the waterfall, and I told you I've been practicing this every day at the waterfall the last few weeks, is I would go down to the waterfall area to where it's like very intense. And when you're down there, you can hear the water now, but you hear the water even louder, but the water and the force of it is causing a major updraft in wind
The wind is crazy.
It's crazy down there.
Seriously, yeah.
And in Dragon Ball Z, when they're powering up,
Yeah.
you know, this is a anime we both watched a lot as a child and now. When they're powering up, like winds begin to move around their body.
Yeah.
And so I'm locking that in. I'm building and meditating around that feeling so that when I'm just chilling, I can just tap into that, and it's almost opening up a portal of energy to come forth. So for some, that's like, what are you talking about? But these are things that we actually preoccupied ourselves with as a kid, believe it or not.
You know, it's like imagination is, I was writing about this today in my book on faith. Let's see if I can recall it right now. It's imagination is like tapping into the creative flow of heaven, right? And you know, as children, oftentimes we're told to stop daydreaming. You know, our imagination's kind of curved to fit more into the system of education. ADHD medications are, you know, running rampant. So that way, you know, imaginations and childhood, like excitement, can kind of be at least managed, quote unquote, and stifled in this way. And it's like, when you can just tap back into that flow like that, to where it's like, you know, just thinking, oh man, I love Dragon Ball Z. Let me take a metaphor that works well for someone that I admire in that show. Let me now tie it into my oneness with Christ. Let it now become a sensational activation, right? To just tap into the greatness God's placed inside of you, man. And it makes me think of what Jesus said on my yoke is easy, my burden is light. Yeah. Right? It's like when theta waves are truly being released, it feels like that. It's like, man, this is kind of easy, right? It's not too hard. I don't really think that, you know, we should, you know, stay in a place that is otherwise for too long. Right. But it takes sometimes a lot of connecting in, because I'll be the first to say, like, I don't always live from that place, but it's conversations like this and reminders like that bring it back into awareness, and then, you know, flow from that place for as long as possible, and then have these same tools to come back into play if it's ever forgotten. Totally. I think it's because of significant experience with unrest that drives us to discover rest. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it's like, a kid doesn't know they're resting. Yeah. It's only once they hit like 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and they start like saying, I'm a little burnt out. Right. Let me reconnect. Right. And for me, I've experienced significant unrest, but that has caused me to discover rest in unique ways, or strive to enter into his rest. You know what I mean? And so I trained a lot of people for the last 10 years on discovering the physiological seat of rest, like how to move your breath and move your body and do different things to ensure that we're more situated physiologically in rest. And it's because I've faced tremendous challenges in that same thing, obviously. So, you know, the earlier today, I was a little bit like, man, what can I get done? Like, and I go, Patrick, tell me, what should I do? Yeah. And you're like, just have fun. And then we started, like you said earlier, we started just brainstorming, and I think we came up with some really cool things for you and your future. We'll buy a house. Yeah, exactly. Conversation. Yeah, we came up with some cool things that I could impart from having that myself, and that it's like time for you. And then also just, we talked about anime that drove us to this walk, and now we created some content while also meditating on the beauties of God within nature and discovering rest, you know? And so it's huge. Like, I think the biggest thing that, you know, in Sydney where we were before this, I was speaking at this conference, and my biggest thing I wanted to impart was rest. So God in the garden, keeping it simple, he desired us to embody rest, but we moved into toil. So we moved in that until the Prince of Peace, Christ, would then breathe upon the disciples, and they would receive what? Rest. They would receive the Spirit that brings rest. And so the best thing we can do, like, I think our highest purpose in life is to discover rest. And rest is a pillar of union with God. So if we can
abide in rest, we can abide in the first imprint God gave us in the garden, and Jesus bestowed upon us. And you said the scripture, the burden, the yoke, easy, light, right? So he has come, he said, I have come to give you rest.
Yeah.
So if I could imprint rest on my future offspring, what would that do? So like my parents did an incredible job. I love them to bits. And what if I can take it further, and that when my children are around me, they would know rest in such a deep way that they don't know it because it's literally their mode of operation.
The culture.
Yeah. So I think a lot of us grew up in unrest, and we're trying to really move the mind and the body in transformations to step into rest, yet we can imprint God's first intent on our future offspring and then compound that over generations.
Yeah.
And really, like, what will that do? You know what I mean?
Crazy thing,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
A child who never knows disease and rest.
That's
you know
right.
What I mean, like physical disease as well too. You know, it's like every single part of the DNA will sing the glory of Christ.
Yeah.
And
That's good.
you know, it's like every single part of your structure will just be in full and total worship.
Beautiful.
You know, man.
Beautiful.
I love it. That's what the next generation needs.
That's it, man. 100%.
Yeah.
Like I was at, you were doing some filming just a bit ago.
Yeah.
And I was over there, took my sandals off, even though these sandals are grounded, which are beautiful. But I took my sandals off just to get even more contact with the holy ground, because the Creator is within creation. So when we make contact with creation, we're making contact with the Creator.
Yeah.
What I was doing there is also, I was just, on PubMed, you will find a research article talking about how grounding or earthing is anti-inflammatory and it helps modulate the immune system. So having dealt with and dealing with an autoimmune condition and a lot of physiological dis-ease and discomfort in my body, I was grounding myself on this holy ground, connecting with the Creator, connecting with the anti-inflammatory, immunomodulative principles within the earth. Yeah. And I was allowing the inflammation to move through my being, and I was allowing the glory of God to be upregulated into my being. Now I understand I'm one with God, the portal of heaven's within me, but God gave us His body temple, and He gave us His physical creation to interact with, so that we could truly discover rest in the physical body, in the physical world. Because it's so important. Like some of the mystical concepts, like unless they ground out in nature, in the physical, it's like whatever. You know what I mean? And that's what you're doing with Kingdom Health. That's what I'm doing with Union Flow. That's what we're doing here in Bali. Like we're at this place called the Bali Time Chamber, an incredible environment that the motion guy, a guy named Nico, developed. And we're here with 16 guys. And I believe the chief thing that we're finding here is rest.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's just awesome.
Yeah, it's having that space, man, like to even just, we talked about it on the walk up here, but just think, man, and just spend that time just in observation of the world. Yeah. And not have a pressure to have to do anything else, but just observe. And I love what you talked about there on the grounding too, because it made me think of what we were talking about earlier back at the camp was, that when you know the inborn technology or qualities that God's placed inside of something, let's say like a food or like grounding, for instance, for reducing inflammatory responses, when you physically get to partner up with science and research, and like you might know this in your heart before science ever knows it, but when you can call it a truth, it's like you get to step into those moments and fully call on rest.
Totally.
Not just say like, oh, this is nice, I think I'll get a 1% benefit from it. It's like, no, let me choose that God can take all of this inflammation out of my body right now through this technology that He's already put inside of me, man. And I think
that's good.
We're just now starting to catch up on science with that, and I think that's awesome. I love seeing science as it gets to there, but there's a lot of ways I think that, truthfully, there's some pioneers, on the horizon who are seeing things like that ahead of time. Sure. And understanding how to be able to tap into that even more. So I think, it's one thing to know that, like, for instance, when you eat carbohydrates, your body, like, let's say in the evening time, you're going to relax deeper. Typically, you'll be able to go into deeper sleep. You're going to be able to recover well. But it's another thing to choose to partner with that technology.
Yeah.
And then that belief just goes into it so much more, right? It's just going into rest by partnering with what Jesus has already put inside of our bodies to be the process for that.
Yeah.
You know, and it's so beautiful, man. Like,
Yeah.
it's not just the physical or the spiritual, right?
That's right.
They come together, man. That's what Jesus was. He's like, come together, man.
That's it. It was like even the other night, you had mentioned that sugar was maybe causing inflammation.
You reminded me.
I go, sugar is anti-inflammatory. And I know
Yeah.
that'll be news to maybe some of you listening,
Yeah.
that sugar is actually anti-inflammatory. I go really in depth with the biochemistry of this and other things. And, but it was like, what if the other stuff was the inflammatory agents, the sugar itself being anti-inflammatory?
Yeah.
And it's like, if you had a bowl of fruit, it would have been maybe different, right? And so it's like understanding, okay, like sweetness brings rest, carbohydrates and quality sugars bring rest, like you had mentioned, and connecting with creation brings rest, like we mentioned. Carrying our breath a certain way brings rest. Everything that we do, we can go deeper in. Like I posted about connection with creation and how it directly correlates with connection with our Creator.
Yeah.
And I posted a little mini teaching you helped me create, the other day.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were like, I'm doing this without knowing it. And a lot of people were like, I do this, but now I'm going to do this with much more understanding. And that's exactly what you said. Yeah. It's like when we know something, it deepens our level of intention and therefore apprehension of the energetics that offers. So it's like, man, when I understand, like I know it feels good when I make contact with the earth, when I'm in nature. But if I understood the ionic exchange and the actual published research and clinical data that making contact with creation is actually expediting regeneration of my body in a myriad of levels, it changes things. It's like, okay, well, I know it feels good, but now I'm going to put myself in that situation so my body can find rest, my mind can find rest, and I can tap in to greater aptitudes of the spirit.
Yeah.
So we can keep going in this topic. But
I think it would be powerful to kind of conclude this one on a shorter piece. So we just have more videos like this for you guys later. But what came up as you were saying that, man, is, how do I want to phrase this? Through understanding comes relationship with the actual process, right? I think of it, and it's like before I met Jesus, I had a concept that there was a creator. I had a feeling that I had a friend somewhere out there, right, who knew all things. But it was when I learned his name was Jesus, I built the relationship. You know, and it's like when you meet somebody, like let's say at the Bali Time Chamber, we've got the people who are serving us the food. It's like when you learn their name is Supra or Andy or Andre, now we have a friendship and a relationship being built. It's not just, oh yes, bringing it back into food, you give me rest carbohydrates, that's nice. It's understanding the deeper processes of how now I can come into relationship with this to an even higher degree. Learn what foods work out best for me. Learn the timing of it even more. So learn the deeper qualities that expand beyond just the qualities of rest in it as well too. And it's when you know the function, when you know the name, when you know the purpose behind something, that's when you can start to come into relationship with it. And I think that's where, this starts to become a lot more fun.
And I think this is extremely important because this is what separates, and it's not to separate, but this is what is distinctive within union with God.
Yes.
It's friendship.
Yes.
I've studied for the last almost 2 decades spirituality.
Yeah.
And the beauty of Christocentric connection, friendship with God, the Blessed Trinity, is that we're actually developing a friendship, a relationship. So you can you can move with the wheelwork of nature, universal energies, the source field. You can move with energy, right? But do you know the one who constructed all things, the one who holds the energetics together by the power of his word? And can you develop a friendship with the author and finisher of all? Yes. It's like, it's so beautiful. Like, you literally can say, Holy Spirit, I welcome you. Jesus Christ, I believe in you. Father of lights, I receive you. And you guys can say that. Some of you can say that afresh. Some of you who haven't said that can go into that and just develop a bond. Like, what's interesting is that somebody can maybe move the wind, but are you friends with the angelic hosts that have been given authority over the wind? And so I think that's amazing because I talk a lot about moving the elementals, about connecting with creation, developing a friendship with it so you could speak to the wind and move it. But deeper than that is the angelic order that God has assigned to it. And you can develop friendship with the whole divine order. And I know it's getting mystical, but one day the things that we're talking about will be very practical. Yep. We're ascending in our level of understanding with the multidimensional world and all its components. Yeah. And so it's just like, guys, like there's no, having rode the waves of knowledge, like Solomon, it's all vanity compared to the fear of the Lord. Mm-hmm. So the fear of the Lord, which means friendship with the creator of all, is the foundation and the cornerstone of our life. And that actually brings life and rest to all the other knowledge, because if you just pursue knowledge, you'll always be found wanting. You'll ride those waves, they'll ebb and flow. But if you're a friend with the constant who created it all, it's like there's just this level and there's this rest that you just reside in. Yeah. It just changes everything.
Well, it's like, are you grounding over there from a place of this is a chore, and I have to fix my body or heal myself, right? Or are you doing it from the place of becoming a friend? That's the process of grounding.
That's it.
I think that's the first step for making all of this more spiritual, mystical stuff a lot just more practical. Yeah. Just become a friend with the process.
That's it.
No longer look at it as it's a chore to eat this way or to move this way, and become a friend. Yeah. With the whole process, man.
That's it.
Good session, bro.
Yeah, good, man.
Yeah, we'll do more. See you guys.
Dude, that was an epic podcast.